I was working with a lady who had just taken over as CEO organization. What she did, and I loved it in the conversation that we were having, is realized very, very quickly that so they felt heard, they felt seen, and she was actually getting to the bottom of what was actually that is a manager who really knows their people, is willing to buck the trends. And I'm giving you my side of the story, but he did it for all of us in different ways. And he also taught us that he wanted all of us to become so skilled at the work that we were doing that we wouldn't need him at all. That was incredible, because if you think about many leaders just hold on to the skills or hold on to how things are done, but he wasn't like that at all. I'm going to make sure you know how to do this, so if I don't pitch up here one day, you are fine, you know how to run all of this.
Today we're speaking with Zozo Abraham, an Insights Discovery Practitioner, over 20 years in learning and development and 36 years in the corporate world. Zozo has worked across pharmaceutical companies like Novartis and Astellas, financial institutions, and multinational teams spanning continents. She specializes in strengthening team communication, collaboration, and performance. In this conversation, we cover 1. What actually defines a high-performing team? 2. How to assess if your team is really performing. 3. The leadership qualities that build psychological safety. 4. And how to address toxic behavior without destroying trust.
Zozo, why don't we start all the way from the beginning? We would love to hear your origin story. What makes Zozo Zozo?
Well, I think that's a lovely question. I don't know how long we have to explore all of it. But if we look at it from the perspective of why I'm doing what I'm doing now, where that love for what I'm doing has come from, it did actually start a long time ago, but I won't tell you my age, so that would be just too embarrassing. But instead, what I'll let you know is, and I think I've mentioned it to both of you previously, is I did grow up. I was born and grew up in South Africa. I started my career there working in the banking industry. And I remember a particular project that I was working on and running. It really was, at the time, just a breathtaking opportunity, because what was going on in that period of time, it was ages ago, just wasn't happening necessarily in other parts of the world. And this project actually revolutionized the way that people did banking. We started off doing some road shows. Now, if you know South Africa, it's actually quite a big country. I mean, it's not the biggest, but it's quite a big country. And we quickly realized that if we wanted to train everybody by the time they needed to have this information, there was no way we were going to be able to physically do this as a roadshow around the country. There were thousands of people that we needed to train. That's how big banking was. And this particular bank was one of the top banks in South Africa. What was really amazing about our head office, it was like a mini city. We had everything in there, absolutely everything. We also had a television studio in our midst. And so we went and hired out the television studio, and we did something that nobody had ever done before. And you talked about, just before we started recording, about streaming. And we were the first to stream training online with people plugging in. And we're talking before the year 2000, right? So this was novel. It was a different way of doing things. And what was fantastic is that it was interactive. So I could take people through what they needed to learn, but I could also take questions and I could respond and I could help them in the moment. And what also happened in that time, and I really hope my manager won't mind me saying this, I still call him my manager. He was, as I said, just phenomenal. He had his part to play. He would say certain things, but he didn't enjoy being in front of the camera at all, like not in the slightest. And sometimes he would just deviate off the script and he would just immediately hand over to me a lot sooner than what I was expecting. And then suddenly I had to take it on board and train people. And it showed me, a level of adaptability. And he just thought that that's something I should do. I should run all that training. I should just, be in charge of all of that. And, at head office, we had like over 5,000 people working just at head office. So there was a lot of people involved at this time, and I had a lot of feedback coming through at that point. And people were saying to me, do you know, have you ever considered maybe going into the field of learning and development, into going into training? And so that was the very first time I thought, you know, maybe this is something to look at, change my career and revisit this. And it's really because of the conversations I was having with people. People were emailing me, they were contacting me, that if I bumped into people in the passage, they would pull me aside and say, you know, we were on that call. Could you maybe do more of this?
Mm.
And I'm not saying it from a flattering point of view, but from a pivotal point of view. This is something that completely changed what I wanted to do in my life. It didn't happen quickly after that, but it was certainly the moment in time that I realized actually maybe this is something I want to explore more.
I'm just curious to know, like, what kind of mindset that the leaders or the team should have when they kind of like going through the learning and development program. They might not be willing to be in, but somehow they are there. So what kind of mindset that they need to have in order to really reap the benefits of spending that time?
Well, the hardest thing is to influence anybody's mindset. That's incredibly hard. And if somebody doesn't want to have the right mindset, then they will not. What helps is communication in advance of the workshop, clarity in advance of the workshop, and for me specifically, the outcomes of the workshop. You know,
Mm.
what is it that this is a part of? What is it that this could potentially support the individual and the team, but also the organization?
Okay. So if I am a leader, let's say I am a leader who is an expat and is working with a team which is foreigner team. They have a diversity of culture. And if I want to first identify, am I running a high-forming team or not? What can I do?
Okay. All right. In that case, let's talk about the behavioral side of it. So
Mm,
if we're looking at the team from the lens of behavior and what we're
mm,
seeing as a leader, I think, and this is personal to me, maybe other leaders will have their own points of view, and that's absolutely
mm,
fine. But for me, I think when it comes to conversation with my team, are they willing to have that conversation? Do they want to talk to me? You know,
Mm.
are they willing to come to the one-to-ones without a sour face? Are we actually listening to one
Mm.
another, giving ourselves the opportunity not only for them to listen to me, but for me to listen to them and the other way around? So that's the first thing I would say,
mm,
you know. And when we do listen, let's take that a step further potentially. When we do listen, what do we do with that information that we're
mm,
listening at? So that is a big one, and maybe I'll give you an example on that in a moment. The other thing that I look at is, what are people not saying? What are they
mm,
not telling us? What are they not saying to the leader? And I've certainly been in situations where I think everything's fine because I'm so focused on getting it done and getting it done, you know, as well as possible, that I haven't taken the time to pause, taken the time to look at what's going on around me. And actually, some people are unhappy.
mm,
So why are they not telling me then? So
mm,
are they telling me what I need to hear? Are they not telling me what I need to hear? And then going into that, the whys. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? So I think that is a quick gauge, a quick way of measuring what's going on in the team, almost getting like a temperature gauge of what's
mm,
happening. The
Mm.
willingness to share, the willingness to
mm,
be open. Yeah, I think that's very important.
So the question is like, okay, what if I already seen that okay, they're not talking to me, they're not open up to me as the
Mm.
leader, then what is the first step that I can do?
Well, you've already touched on it a little bit, Irina, yourself and Girish, in terms of, you know, the four pillars, and starting
mm,
to potentially in that situation work on climate, starting to consider what's going on in this climate. Where are we
Mm.
seeing that the climate is successful in this team? Where are we seeing that the climate is not successful in the team? And then what do we do to break down barriers? Maybe the previous manager, or even me as a leader, maybe I haven't set enough time aside to actually just have those one-to-ones, to just really listen, to just be part of the team. Maybe I send them on training courses just so that they've got stuff to do, and I show that I'm developing them, but I'm not really developing them
Mm.
with a heart of interest.
Mm,
So maybe there's some stuff that's going on there that they need to tell me. Maybe there's somebody in the team that
mm,
is, I suppose, either being disrespectful, not behaving as they should, or holding on to the power, holding on to the resources, or being undermining. Maybe there's some toxic behaviors going on, and they're worried to tell me. Maybe there's stuff that they think, well, it will be seen that they are telling on other people. So how do we create an environment where we are then able to have those harder conversations? And often that starts with the leader. And the leader could potentially be that person to say, you know what, this is what I'm noticing. I might be wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and not necessarily do it in front of the whole team. I mean, that will work as well, but also maybe in the one-to-ones. Yeah, give me that opportunity to find out what's going on. I was working with a lady who had just taken over as CEO of a pharmaceutical of an organization, and what she did, and I loved it in the conversation that we were having, is realized very, very quickly that she had to listen to what was going on in the business before she started acting. And yes, there were some things she could do simultaneously, and of course she did because she was a very successful person. But taking the time to understand things from every single person in her leadership team's point of view was vital. So they felt heard, they felt seen, and she was actually getting to the bottom of what was actually going on. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Like very practical.
yeah.
Very.
I think we had a similar situation where we were with a client with a leadership team, which is spread across Asia. And due to diversity of culture and also due to diversity of personality style, especially the leader's personality style, we could notice that there were some members who were not willing to open up to the leader, no matter how much the leader tried. But I can see what you did, that maybe the leader needs to have that one-on-one conversation, showcase that genuine curiosity, that genuine empathic concern, not just listen and understand, but what the leader can do to support that person.
Yeah. And folks, sometimes that takes a bit of time, right? It's might not happen in the first two or three conversations or
Yeah.
whatever the case might be, and that's all right. Because as a leader, we can be patient as well. What we want to do is nurture that flower that we're growing, let it open up and blossom up when it's ready. And we can't force it, because as soon as you start forcing it, no, it's not going to work.
I think that's
Yeah.
beautifully summed up. It's like, yeah, you gotta wait and be patient. It's like a flower that you need to wait for the time for it to blossom. You can't force the flowers to just bloom.
Exactly. Exactly. It doesn't mean that we don't keep fertilizing the soil or feeding the soil with good stuff, but sometimes we just have to wait.
We like to use is Insights Discovery's team effectiveness model, the one with 4 quadrants. We would love to hear what you think about it, because I like the clarity it has, those 4 clear domains of focus, flow, climate, and process, where teams can look at each of those domains and then dive deeper into and identify areas or gaps which might be becoming an obstacle for them to grow further. What do you think about that model?
So what I have worked on very recently with an organization, and they're a very big organization that spans over the globe, actually. We've done we've done personal effectiveness, we're still doing personal effectiveness as people join. But now what we're looking to do is to start to shift towards team effectiveness. I think what helps me is when I'm having conversations with team members, team leaders, is to understand where the team are at. Because, Insights is a wonderful tool, but you can also add other tools to what you're doing. So potentially one might need to look at the 5 dysfunctions of a team, for example, and consider that either before or after or in conjunction with some of this work. So I don't think there's one tool that will give you the entire solution when it comes to team effectiveness. But what's wonderful about Insights is that already the colors are known, they're understood, the language is there. And so people can actually get to grips with this particular model very quickly. And that's a benefit. That really helps. Doing an analysis with the leader in advance, really getting their thinking in advance is very helpful. I have been in situations where the leader is talking to me. The leader is very clearly not seeing some of the blind spots themselves. And in that situation, when you're an external facilitator, we're in a very unique position. We can make the decision, do I tell this leader certain things here? Do I coach this leader to come to this understanding before we run a program, whether it be team effectiveness or something else? Or do I just nod and agree and just go in and take the money? That's the reality. What do I do in this situation? And I have had a leader who has almost dictated to me exactly what they want to see run in a session like this. And of course, I understand it because they want to retain the control. That makes sense. And in many cases, they understand the team better than anyone. So of course, that makes sense. But at the same time, as somebody external, I'm able to bring in a different perspective, maybe things that they really do need to listen to. And it's about gauging how much are they willing to understand where you're coming from as much as you're willing to understand where they are coming from. So that initial conversation is so important. And so I love to understand where people are at before we just go and launch a team effectiveness model. And as you say, those pillars, as they call them, the 4 pillars, are really, really helpful because they can help us then to diagnose what is going on in this team. Does this team have the focus that they need? Does this team, for example, lack the climate, or as you said, psychological safety? These can be potentially interchangeable words to help us get to where we need to go. So it is a great tool, and I definitely do use it.
In our experience, what we found out, like, it's a very healthy tool for us to measure a 90-day program. So we do this before pre-program, where the entire team anonymously starts rating themselves on those 32 attributes of this thing, and then they try to do it again. However, the most profitable part of doing that, what we identified was, apart from showing them their team wheel where they saw those things, but when they saw the results for the first time in the training room before the pre-program results, where they assigned points to themselves on those 4 pillars and 32 attributes, some of them were surprised that some scores were very low. But what happened eventually is this leader had a moment of reflection that, there are things that he misunderstood about his team. It opened up conversation for them, like, okay, we need to talk about this. And then I feel it's a process they have just started. Now they have identified something that maybe we should work on, and they've built a new norm. We call these emotionally intelligent norms that they should start practicing. And if we feel it's a process, 90 days is too short, I feel it takes some time to start building these norms and then continuing and constantly refining those norms. Because remember, recently, one of our clients, they started a norm. They identified they need to do this. They identified they should have a BD meeting every Wednesday because their scores were very low in process. But as they started doing that every Wednesday, they also realized they don't like it to be so formal. They want to be more informal because they were an intact team meeting each other. And that's how they started to adapt it. And then they were doing these conversations, and they feel now they're more open. Their trust level has gone up because of that. And that's how I feel like it constantly evolves. Hence, that model, that tool just helps you measure things and helps you, I feel like, in the long run, to build these new norms.
Absolutely, absolutely. And interesting that you're talking about process. One of the things that I was recently talking to a team about is clarity. And so the process, absolutely, they thought the process was working fine, and I think that would be true actually. But when it came to clarity of what they were doing, there wasn't as much clarity. And because there were multiple little teams within the intact team, they didn't understand what all the other teams are doing. And so we could have a lovely conversation around that, not just to better understand, but also to say, we are, just like we say in Insights, we are coming at these things from different points of view. And let's talk about that, what's getting in the way. Yeah.
May I go back to that manager who had the biggest influence on you, and you still call that person your manager? From your words, I can imagine that he's probably a great leader and he's leading a high-performing team. Would you agree with that?
Well, when he took us all on, we were
Mm.
very much a dysfunctional team. Um, and I think that's another thing is just going to happen, right, with teams. Is there a perfect team? I've never met a perfect
Yeah.
team. But I think that's okay because what he taught us through that process, and I think it wasn't just me, I think he taught all of us this, is we can be who we are, and we were all so different. And that's all right. And he would do his best to support all of us in the way we showed up individually. So that was great. And as I say, when this opportunity came up for me, he supported me. Well, back then, there was no such a thing as flexible working. There
Mm.
was nothing like that in head office where I worked, certainly not in the structure that I was in. And yet he was willing to work with me, and he allowed me to have a level of flexibility in my work day. So I would come in super early in the morning, hop 6, 7 in the morning, and I would work till about 3:30 in the afternoon, and then I'd leave. Even though my traditional day was actually 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, but traditionally it was 8 to 4. He would let me leave, so start earlier, leave earlier, and almost like compress my day a bit, which sounds like nothing these days, right? Because people do that all the time, but it was never heard of before. And what that meant is he encouraged me to go down this route of self-discovery and try different things. And I started working at another organization.
Mm.
And he was aware of it. He was fully aware of it, and he was supportive of it. And that organization really helped me as well to start to think, where do I want to go? How am I going to point this needle in a direction that's going to allow me to fulfill what I think I'm good at? So, I mean, that is a manager who really knows their people
Mm.
and is willing to buck the trends
Mm.
and do something to support their
Mm.
team. And I'm giving you my side of the story, but he did it for all of us in different ways. So, as I say, very unique experience.
Seems like he know how to motivate people. First thing he gave is autonomy.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely,
Mm.
Jarena. And he also taught us that, in fact, this was his motto. He wanted all of us to become so skilled at the work that we were doing that we wouldn't need him at all.
Mm.
Mm.
Super.
So that was incredible, because if you think about many leaders just hold on to the skills or hold on to how things are done, out of fear or whatever the case might be, out of control. But he wasn't like that at all. He was like, I'm going to make sure you know how to do this. So if I don't pitch up here one day, you are fine. You know how to run all of this. And yeah, that was very special.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of Richard Branson's saying where he says, train people well enough that they can leave you anytime, but treat them so well that they don't want to leave you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Another situation that we encounter sometimes is that when leaders identify a team member who is potentially ruining the climate of that entire team and is bringing down the performance, how does a leader handle such a team member?
It's a great question. And again, there's different layers, different ways that we could handle the question. I just want to give you an example, if I may.
Oh,
I was
please.
running an Insights Discovery workshop with this organization, and I joined the workshop. I was there early to set it up and all of that. And the person that I was liaising with, they came into the workshop clearly not in a good mood. They weren't in a good
Mm.
place. And there were certain things that were going on throughout the workshop that I could notice there was stuff happening for this individual. Um, and there were some behaviors that were coming through that were just not acceptable, I would say.
Mm.
And so I had to go have a conversation with the leader of that team. And it's an opportunity then for the leader of the team, whether they're aware of it or if they're being made aware of it for the very first time, to actually start to delve deeper to try and find out what is actually going on with this individual. I think it can be a tricky situation if we just jump to conclusions
Mm,
about what we're seeing. So the behavior is definitely indicative of something that's going on, but we definitely need the exploration to try and understand how our perception might be meeting their perception so that we don't come at a clash with our perceptions. So what this allowed the particular leader to do is to take that situation away, have a conversation, delve deeper. And it actually became clear to this leader that there were certain things that had gone on for this individual. They had almost piled up. And this person was now reacting to what was
mm,
going on. And I get that. I've been in that situation, where it's hard then just to maintain what you have to show people because you're reacting internally, and then sometimes that comes out in our behavior. So the why is this person acting the way they're acting is very important to try and discover. If we're unable to challenge that individual's why or speak to them or consult them or support them or guide them, then I think that's a different situation because then we have to look at that level of toxic behavior and start to ask ourselves as a leader, how much of this are we going to continue to allow? Because it's our role to protect every member of the team. And if this individual is taking all our energy, all our time, all our resources, and we're then not able to be fair to the rest of the team, then we have to reevaluate. Do we go down the route of having a hard conversation with the HR team, getting them involved? What is it that we can do to get a bit of support for us as a leader so that when we go into a conversation with that person, we are ready to be able to share with them that this is what we see, this is what we'd love for you to change, and
mm,
we are here for you if you're willing to do this. And then again, leave it up to them. Do they want to take that step forward? If they do, we'll be there. If they don't, then we have to think of other routes of how we handle that.
That's also like another like experience that we have quite often, that you want leaders hired us to help and want a quick fix. And it's kind of like, oh, it's not going to happen so quickly. 3 months, you won't see a lot of change, but that's a good foundation to start something.
Fully agreed. Fully agreed. And in a way, I can't blame leaders, right? Because things are working at such a
That's
fast
right.
pace. And it's not like it was before. There's higher expectations, the level of change that's coming in, and leaders themselves don't necessarily stick around with a
Hmm.
team for a very long time. So just as you're starting to fertilize the soil, that person leaves, and then somebody else comes in. And then there's another level of change. So that can be very difficult for teams to come to grips with. Or the leader themselves, the manager themselves might notice actually there's a lot of flux in their team
Mhm.
because people don't stick around as much potentially as they used to. A better offer or something has happened in a personal capacity. So yeah, it's hard, but perseverance, patience, and in the time that we have with those individuals, let's see what we can do to get them to actually rely on us as leaders and trust us to have their backs.
yeah. In
Mm.
one final question, Zozo, we would love to hear, and I'm sure our audience would want to know, how do you help teams go about building a high-performing team? What is the process you take them through it, through your trainings?
Well, I think the key thing is for me to understand how long I have with the team.
Hmm.
Do I have a journey? You were talking about the 90 days. Do
Yeah.
I have that path that I can follow with them? Because then that helps me to understand, to shape what it is that we're trying to do. So having the clarity of why I'm there, having the clarity as to their objectives, their outcomes, and matching those so that we can create a path for the leader, for the team, then that's very helpful for me to understand. It's basically like a framework. What are we working on together? And how long do I have to work with you? And it's not because I'm trying to eke out all the time, but like you said, how do we measure it? Because if I only
Hmm.
have 90 days, then I have to measure now, today. We have to start measuring
Hmm.
so that when we get to the end of the 90 days, we can remeasure and see what has happened. And potentially the leader might only give me that 90 days, but once they see
Mm,
what's happened at the end of the 90 days, it might give me another 90 days so that we can work together. So it's understanding all of those kind of
mhm,
outcomes that we're working on. And then from the team themselves, it's also very useful to try and understand, what do they want from a team? What does their ideal look like? So if they could just change anything in the team,
mm,
what would it be? Where would they go to first? And trying to collate that information and seeing, okay, at the end of the 90 days, are we any closer to your ideal? And it could be something small. It could be, we just have so many meetings, a bit like
mm,
that organization you were talking about, and we really need to cut down on them because it just distracts me so much every time we have a meeting. So it could be less meetings. That's my ideal. Or I only come into the meeting for my part. I share what I need to share, and then I'm back out working on the actual
mm,
work. So having that understanding from the leader, from the team, sometimes from the organization itself, is really helpful so that we can set them up for the best success that we can. But also the reality is that even if we do it, even if we manage it in 90 days, 180 days, chances are that the team will change in some way, and that's okay. How do we set
mm,
them up to remain stable,
mm,
robust, able to handle any of those changes slightly further down the track?
Mm.
mm,
I think lastly, I want to ask, like, if any teams want to work with you, how can they contact or how can they find you?
mm.
Jarina, through some research. No, I'll try and I'm on LinkedIn. I know I have not updated my LinkedIn for a really awfully long time, but I am on LinkedIn. And I have a website as well. So they can always go onto my website, which is zoetraining.uk.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you so much, Zozo, for your time
Thank
and
you
for
both.
sharing.